Today we seem to have an inside peek at a Games Workshop legal document, and the perhaps fairly hefty price that you have to pay if you sign up to get some preview things for them with a non-disclosure agreement. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're just taking a look at a rather interesting document that's been circling the internet lately. It appears to be a leaked Games Workshop non-disclosure agreement that's been uploaded to Reddit, and quite a few other content creators have already done a bit of analysis on it already. It seems to have been posted originally by a channel called Miscast, who seems to make some pretty awesome miniature projects and terrain, both inside and outside of the Warhammer universe. I thought we'd take a quick look through the document, as there's some really quite interesting stuff here. So this document that's been uploaded to Reddit appears to be one of the non-disclosure agreements aimed at various content creators who create videos and articles related to Warhammer and Games Workshop's products. It appears to be one version of the document that you have to sign if you want Games Workshop to send you some free stuff for review. The primary purpose of it, I believe, is to stop people just leaking the things that they're sent as soon as they get them, and they play along a little bit with Games Workshop's release schedule. It is quite common for a lot of people to have these sorts of agreements in place when you are sending out pre-release material for review, and I understand it's a relatively common practice within the gaming industry as a whole, never mind just tabletop games. I must admit though, some of the clauses do seem surprisingly restrictive and punitive. Definitely some big trade-offs if you do want to be sent all that free material. According to Mr. Miscast, this appears to be a newer version of a previous document, perhaps with some slightly stricter rules around non-competition and barring near any criticism whatsoever. In any case, let's take a look at some of the most interesting bits. First up, the time period of the NDA is really quite long. If you do sign up to this, then you're committed to at least 3 years to abide by all the terms of it, and you can't just get a year or two down the line and then decide that it wasn't really in your best interest in the long term. Games Workshop is going to keep your content locked down until after that has lapsed. Potentially not the best thing for newer YouTube channels or article creators. When they sign up to this, the trade-off might be in their favour, getting a bunch of free stuff, but perhaps a year or so down the line they might come to regret that, as it might make it a lot harder to monetize their content or provide more objective reviews. 3 years is a very long time. It's longer than my YouTube channel has been in existence at this point. As expected, the main purpose of the non-disclosure agreement is to keep confidential information secret, though it is kind of interesting that they lump into the confidential information the very fact that you have any sort of deal of this nature with Games Workshop and the contents of this NDA in itself. I find it kind of interesting that Games Workshop clearly doesn't want the general public to know how it treats its influencers and reviewers. Other than that, there's the stuff that you'd expect. No leaking or revealing any Games Workshop business practices or secrets, and of course not revealing any information about models, data, or product information, presumably everything around their new releases and the contents of codexes and things. It appears that you're able to reveal the information once it becomes general knowledge. It does seem that for the people with NDAs, they all tend to post their videos at the same time, so presumably for each release, Games Workshop sets a time that you're allowed to create content on it. Everyone gets all their reviews together ahead of time, and then as soon as that time is reached, it's then open season for talking about all the new stuff. Possibly the bit that just feels a little bit extraneous to a non-disclosure agreement, and seems kind of unpleasant though, is this non-compete order that they've got, which seems like it to be incredibly restrictive to develop any sort of business as a content creator while you're under the terms of this agreement. If you're going exactly as the rules as written in the document, and you don't have any sort of leniency whatsoever, it does seem like it would be virtually impossible to sell anything to anyone without breaking the agreement. Basically, Games Workshop designate their customers as restricted customers, and those restricted customers happen to be anyone who's bought anything from them within the last 12 months. Basically, these are customers who you're kind of supposed to have no dealing with whatsoever, which of course, if you're making any sort of videos in the space, is likely going to be the vast majority of the people watching you, and perhaps the vast majority of people who are playing Warhammer, unless they've perhaps bought literally everything that they've ever got through a third-party store, or perhaps has nothing but miniatures from alternative sources that aren't from Games Workshop. To be honest, I'm not sure how you'd avoid having any dealings with any of those customers if you happen to be just selling something completely different. Warhammer players certainly aren't everywhere, but there's certainly enough of them about in the general population, never mind people who are actually watching wargaming videos. Basically, for those restricted customers, it sounds like you're basically not allowed to seek any sort of income or sales from them whatsoever. I believe that the terms that they use are canvass, solicit, or otherwise seek the custom of them. That means that if you were making content alongside a regular business, I presume that means that you're not allowed to have them buy things from your store, or contribute to things like a crowdfunding platform such as Patreon, or perhaps even YouTube memberships. I might be reading that incorrectly, please let me know if I'm wrong. But if that is indeed how it works, I can only assume that it can't be all that well enforced by Games Workshop, as I'm assuming that they have a fair amount of people who have signed up to this order, who say operate their own merchandise, have crowdfunding or streaming services, or other ways in which they monetize their content. Otherwise this would just literally be for people who are doing it just part-time, more as a source of fun, than trying to make it the main thing that they do. On top of that, and also fairly problematically, they say that you can't get a restricted customer to cease or refrain from conducting business with Games Workshop, or reduce the amount of business conducted with them. To me, that kind of sounds like you wouldn't be able to say virtually anything negative about any of Games Workshop's products. You wouldn't be able to review one of their books and say, for example, this book does not seem to be a good deal to me. I would save your money and buy something else, as that would seem to be reducing the amount of business that's conducted with Games Workshop. By the terms of the agreement, it sort of seems like you'd have to be unashamedly positive about just about everything, or just review the things, talk about the content, and don't really offer any sort of opinion as to whether or not you should buy it. Finally, just to double down on that theme, there seems to be a last little clause at the end that basically prevents you from doing or saying anything negative about Games Workshop whatsoever. At 4.171, at any time during the term, you can't do or say anything which may be harmful to the reputation of GW. To me, that doesn't really sound very conducive for creating any sort of balanced content. You're basically just going to have to shill for Games Workshop, say they're doing everything great, or decide not to make any comment whatsoever. Overall, I'd just say that this all seems like a lot to deal with. And to be honest, even if you were creating some incredibly positive reviews about Games Workshop's things, I could see it being relatively scary at least to try and make content around the subject, just in case you wind up violating one or more terms of the agreement, and Games Workshop follows you up with legal action. I'm sure that's not something that they'd choose to do in the vast majority of cases. It will cost a lot of money and not have a lot in it for them really. But even just having the mere threat of that hanging over you is not something that I personally want for myself. So overall, if Games Workshop does wind up offering you one of these, you would get a fair amount of free fun stuff to review, and it could be kind of fun for your own personal hobbying, but you basically give up the chance to make any significant income from your channel, can't make any sort of negative review about any Games Workshop product without violating it, and if you're talking about Games Workshop as a whole, you can't talk about their pros and cons, you can only talk about the positives. I can't say it really sounds like the most enticing deal to me. I'd certainly feel free to go and have a read of it yourself. I'll put a link to the Reddit thread down in the comments below. Feel free to let me know if I've misunderstood anything in the document, or if there's anything else important hiding there that I've missed. I am very much an enthusiastic amateur reading over this, and certainly not a lawyer or anyone who's too familiar with the ins and outs of gaming non-disclosure agreements. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly try and keep up with any other interesting Warhammer related news. I typically tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel and keep it going, I'd just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which is what allows me to make videos so much more often than I did before. And I guess if I'd signed up to one of these agreements, then you wouldn't see half the amount of videos on the channel as you do currently now. If you'd like to help support going forward, I do try and offer a few different rewards for channel patrons, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help out, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.